Welcome to the Everything 80s podcast, Stranger Things Season 3 preview show. Hey guys, what's happening? Welcome back to the Everything 80s podcast and doing sort of a separate standalone show here now because Stranger Things Season 3 is coming out on July 4th. So I thought I'd do sort of, a recap of the first two seasons, what to expect coming into the third season, theories, predictions, all that good stuff. So we'll get right to it. But before we begin, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, anywhere you find your podcasts, I should be there. Okay, let's do this thing. So it feels like it's been forever since season 2 of Stranger Things finished. And if you're like me, you're just trying to breathe and waiting, obviously, in anticipation, which everyone is with Stranger Things. It's been called the ultimate love letter to the 80s, and I really think that is a good description of this show. It takes some, obviously classic movie tropes, some themes, references, and it kind of puts them all together into more of an original story while creating their own legacy at the same time. So I'm assuming you've watched the show because some of the classic things it's referenced over the first two seasons, Dungeons and Dragons, E.T. is a big influence for Elle and the whole thing. Jaws is referenced a lot. Return of the Jedi, The Karate Kid, The Goonies, The Lost Boys, Dawn of the Dead. We'll get to all that different stuff. So this is what we'll do. We'll start looking at the basically quick synopsis of season 1 and season 2. So, again, if you're listening to a show like this, I assume you've watched Stranger Things. If not, stop this and just go watch the entire thing. Actually, both seasons right away just to get up to speed. But obviously there's spoilers here. And I think when 4 years have gone by, you've kind of missed the boat on anything to do with spoilers. So here's just a quick catch up on what happened in the first season. So we're in the fictional town of Hawkins, Indiana, and it's 1983. And there's a government agency has accidentally opened up a rift into what they call the Upside Down, which is a mirror image of our real world. So it's an alternate dimension where there's, various monsters and creatures that reside, including in this season, the creature called the Demogorgon, which is used as one of the sort of pawn pieces in Dungeons and Dragons the kids are playing when the show starts. Interesting, every time they're playing Dungeons and Dragons and they're using a figure character, that character is probably going to show up in the show. So at the same time, there is a young girl with a shaved head who has escaped from a lab where she had been used for sort of psychokinetic experiments. So on a rainy night, a la E.T., the boys run into her, catch her in the flashlight, exactly like that scene when they discover E.T. So they take her into their home and kind of under her wing. She's branded with the number 11, and they begin to call her 11, or L for short. So Elle is able to control things with her mind, like Yoda, really. And that anytime she does that, it results in her nose dripping some blood. She becomes very weak. Again, this is just a quick synopsis as opposed to all 8 episodes. So Will has an older brother named Jonathan, who's a bit of an outcast. He's tormented by the school jock who's named Steve Harrington. Steve is dating Mike's older sister, Nancy. She has a best friend named Barb, who has also disappeared in the Upside Down. Spoiler alert here. Barb doesn't make it. The whole time, Will is gone through the whole season. He's trapped in the Upside Down. So the first series culminates with Will being rescued from the Upside Down and 11 destroying the Demogorgon, which while doing so sucks her into the Upside Down too. So with the end of the first season, we're left with Will showing signs that he's still actually infected with something. He kind of pukes up this little tadpole type thing that escapes down his sink. So he's obviously still connected physically some way to the Upside Down. And as the series finishes as well, the first season, Chief Jim Hopper, is leaving some Eggo waffles in the woods in a little sort of mailbox sort of thing. And Eggos happen to be Eleven's favorite food. So obviously implying she is still around and she is still able to kind of navigate between both worlds. So that leads into Stranger Things season 2, which I think had the greatest teaser trailer I've ever seen. I don't know if you remember during the Super Bowl, it debuted the trailer, so more teaser. It started with a commercial of the old Eggo waffles featuring the kid who's the older brother from the Wonder Years. And, you know, no one knew this thing was coming. No one knew there'd be a second season or anything like that. Basically, like, yeah, everyone just sort of flipped out when this happened. So the thing with the first season is it was an instant classic and it caught everyone off guard, including Netflix, it seems. If you recall back, like no one knew of this show. It wasn't advertised. It wasn't promoted. They put such a little amount of money into the show and the like promotion and advertising that the strength of the show was built on word of mouth. It's kind of like the old school classic, like as much as things can go viral and they're pushed by, you know, whatever Netflix or massive corporations, the old school word of mouth, like you've got to watch this show, is still happening. And you can see it in the show. I mean, it's low budget in a sense that like it doesn't look low budget, but they're using a lot of simple techniques and kind of effects to achieve it. It's a lot of what they've done is creating like with lighting and mood and tone and intending sort of drama as opposed to just being like blam all in your face. And sometimes that can be some of the most horrific type of movies or shows. So it's amazing what happened. Like I don't think I watched the show till 6 months after it came out. I think it was, I don't even remember when it debuted, but like I said, no one knew this was up. It's just such a weird thing. Netflix just dumps it out there, doesn't really tell anyone, but then it's so good. Of course, everyone just freaks out and grows with it. So the problem, like any monster hit, is how do you follow it up with a sequel? I mean, this has plagued any franchise you can ever think of, from obviously Star Wars to Back to the Future to Indiana Jones to the modern Batman movies. It's like you're always stuck with that thing of how do you avoid doing a complete rehash of the first season, but you want to like take it in a new direction, but you don't want it to stray too far away. You want it to stay to its roots, but you don't want people to think like, we just already saw this in the first season. Like there's always that letdown, kind of like if you think how big The Dark Knight was when they had Heath Ledger into it, and they sort of took it in this new direction. And then when the third Batman movie came, what was that? The Dark Knight Returns, or, you know, when they're bringing back Bane, and you sort of already know this world, so it doesn't have as big an impact because you're already familiar with everything. So with Stranger Things season 1, you're seeing everything for the first time. It's all new. It's all novel. The second season, there's no transition. You're right into it. So it's really a tough thing to kind of balance between sort of serving what got you there, but like not being restricted by that. I think season 2 did a good job. I think it held up very well. So the second season has a new creature, has new characters. This time we're dealing with the Mind Flayer, which is this massive creature. It's terrorizing Will and eventually all of Hawkins. We now have Bob, who is Joyce's new boyfriend, played by nostalgia staple Sean Astin from obviously Lord of the Rings and the Goonies. And amazing thing, like how would they think the Stephen King It world exists in the same universe as Stranger Things. As one of the scenes in the car, Bob's talking about being tormented by a clown, which he imagines, but it sort of coincides with the right time period of when it would be set. And also because Bob claimed to live, I think he said like up in Maine, and like that's where a lot of Stephen King movies are set. So just amazing thing they sort of crossed over that a bit. There's also a new girl thrown in the mix named Max, who's kind of like a mild love interest and kind of becomes a kind of not I don't want to say a third wheel, but she kind of gets in between some of the boys who are now getting a little more interested in girls. She's also got an evil stepbrother, Billy, who looks like right out of the Lost Boys movie. So Will is possessed by the Mind Flayer in season 2, and it ends up with him drawing all these like underground maps of Hawkins and tunnels they realize all connect together. There are these new creatures called the demo dogs, which they travel through all these tunnels, they create chaos, they're trying to destroy everything in their path. At the same time, Dustin has discovered a small, what he calls a polywog, that he nicknames Dart, and then Dart will get out of hand as well. At the same time, you're wondering where 11 is in all this. Turns out she's been holding up in the woods in a cabin owned by Jim Hopper. So after the events of season 1, she escaped from the Upside Down and has been laying low with Hopper ever since. So it turns out there are other girls like 11. That's how the series starts. And later on in, I forget what episode it is, 7, 8, she goes to she travels to, is it Pittsburgh, to go sort of see this group of outcasts or whatever, kind of in a throwaway episode, which really doesn't connect to the rest. But what I believe they're doing here is called a backdoor pilot, which is where you, like in the middle of a season, you put like a standalone episode to see if it'll work well as a spinoff. And a lot of series have done this over the years. So I think that's the idea, that if with those other characters, they can do a spinoff show, and that it's sort of a test of how that might hold up. It's actually like a pretty decent episode, and it connects a lot with Return of the Jedi and kind of the connections with the Force and Yoda and everything. Ultimately, 11 is able to battle the Mind Flayer, and she sends it back to the Upside Down, though it nearly kills her. The end of the season teases that the Mind Flayer is still around, though. So again, like, with it so being hard to recreate the magic, it's got to be more of a continuation of something you've already seen. I think it was, season 2 was still very good. I personally didn't like the way they brought back 11. I thought that would have been a little more dramatic and a little more of like iconic scenes with her. I know when she like comes into the house at the end, but I thought like her escape from the Upside Down wouldn't have been so sort of kind of casually portrayed. You know what I mean? She's just kind of like hanging around the whole time. And I realize you can't do, you can't go like 6 episodes without having her in it. So I thought that would have been a little more, more of a grand reveal and debut. So if you've seen the trailers, there's been, a couple like teaser type trailers. The first big trailer they had came out a few months ago, and then the second main one going into the season was just like a week or 2 ago. So I think the first trailer really sets the tone of what to expect from the 3rd season. And, there's a ton of different breakdown things, which I can't totally do if we're not looking at the video at the same time. And there's like, awesome ones by New Rockstars does a really good trailer breakdown. They do the best trailer breakdowns usually. But again, like, I think that first trailer kind of gives us like an idea of the direction of the show. And I love the fact that it's set in the summertime. And I think that gives it, again, more of a different dynamic and a different, with the other ones more set in that typical fall, Halloween, spooky season. This is more, it gives more of like a coming of age story. It's that whole idea of like one summer can change everything. The idea of summer romance, and I think they're bringing in sort of that movie style into it, which I think is amazing idea. Again, because like with the Duffer Brothers who've created this and all the writers and producers, they don't want to risk anything like getting stale or not living up to the hype. And I think they're smart to like start moving into new directions and creating like a different atmosphere around each season. So as well as that, this season, and then obviously just based on the trailers, looks a lot like larger, grander, way more production values. A big focus of the 3rd season is the new Starcourt Mall, which, was something, again, this is set in 1985, And it's a thing that's happening in the 80s as like downtown businesses and towns all over North America are starting to go to business. They're starting to fade away, and these new malls are dominating and taking away from everything. You know, they're in usually not necessarily in the outskirts, but pushed away from the, you know, like the center focus of the town. And it's funny now is the malls are starting to fade away to online commerce and Amazon and everything like that. So a focus in the third season is this new mayor in the town. Again, watch the trailer just to be caught up if you haven't, and I'm sure you already have. So it seems obvious that there is a massive connection between that new Starcourt Mall and what I assume is a government involvement regarding the Upside Down. So the mall is either appears to be like a front or, so, you know, just something to either study or harness the power that's possible from the Upside Down. So it's hard to tell how much the people in power are aware of, say, something like the Mind Flayer, and that they're just trying to, like they've always been trying to kind of harness and investigate what's going on in the Upside Down through both seasons. So like 11 remarks that the gate to the Upside Down didn't close properly and he got back out. I think one of the coolest things in this trailer, and I think is sort of symbolic, but I could be completely wrong, is the inclusion of The Who's Baba O'Reilly, aka Teenage Wasteland, as the theme song. And, you know, everything is done so specifically in these trailers. And I really think that the inclusion of this song, kind of nicknamed Teenage Wasteland, is implying that one of the main characters, like one of the main kids, is going to be killed off in this season. And I think they need to have a huge moment like this to really cement the impact and the future of the show. It seems, as of right now, it's pretty clear, like there's obviously going to be a fourth season, and it looks pretty guaranteed that there'll be a fifth season. That'll probably be it from as much as I've read. So the thing I find interesting, if you look at the impact that the Marvel movies, you know, especially Infinity War and Endgame, have kind of reset a bit of a modern standard on how characters can be eliminated, that if you have enough faith in your vision and your creativity of your movie or your whatever it is, you know, you can pull off these massive choices and ideas, knowing it's how it's going to play out in the long term. And I like, again, with Marvel and the Avengers, no matter how big they are, the characters can be eliminated. And I think Stranger Things needs to follow suit and kind of like capitalize on what the MCU has been able to do for entertainment right now. So I honestly think one of the main kids needs to kick the bucket this season, and just to see how that plays into it. So here are some of the new characters for season 3. So like I mentioned, the first one is the new mayor, and he's named Mayor Klein, played by Cary Elwes, who was in The Princess Bride, if you remember him. Next main character is Jake Busey, brother of Gary Busey. He plays Bruce, who is a kind of shifty reporter who works for the Hawkins Post. So he's either going to dig up something he shouldn't or get too involved. Interestingly, I got to assume Bruce, he's named after the shark from Jaws, is what the production team and whatever, they nicknamed him through the movie. The next one is Francesca Real. She plays lifeguard Heather. She was she was the sister on, what was the Miranda Sings show on Netflix? Whatever that one was. She was the sister on that. She seems to have a significant role, as episode 3 is entitled The Case of the Missing Lifeguard. And she's featured in the trailer as well, too, the girl in the red bathing suit. Next one is Maya Hawke, daughter of Ethan Hawke. She plays, I think they're going with Robin with her name, but she works with Steve at the mall at the ice cream parlor called Scoops Ahoy. So she's said to be this like alternative girl, probably a new love interest for Steve, or whatever. She's going to be in the mix and cause some sort of mishap. And it's hard to determine exactly what role she'll play, but she's obviously going to get thrown into the loop and get caught up in everything like the same way Max did. So, but who knows how big her actual role will be. Here's an interesting thing. I didn't realize you can hear a few voices in the different trailers, which is apparently the actual Mind Flayer talking. And that's a real actor voice done by a guy named Michael Park, who's from the Broadway show Dear Evan Hansen, if you are aware of that. Okay, here's something with the third season, which is mind-blowing to me. And again, if you've listened to this podcast, or if you'd been aware of everything that was going on with New Coke. And in one of the other trailers, it involves Billy coming on for his lifeguard shift. And the mothers, including Karen Wheeler, Nancy and Mike's mom, she's sitting poolside by her friends, and he walks through as Heather, the other lifeguard. They switch shifts. She's drinking a can of New Coke, which they specifically show that is a can of New Coke. And I'm a huge buff on everything to do with the history of New Coke. I did a whole entire podcast. You can go back and listen to that one. And this is an amazing, what do you call it? Just where a combination of like a brand extension and marketing and promotion, but also nostalgia connected all together with one show on something that used to exist but didn't, and they've brought it back. Here's the quick rundown if you're not aware of what New Coke was. So going into the 80s, Coke was getting killed by Pepsi in the marketplace, and they decided they had to do something to switch it up. So this is 1985, and it's the 100th anniversary of Coke, which was created in 1885. And they decided that they would introduce a whole new version of it, like a whole new taste, a whole new formula. The idea is they wanted to create actually like a sweeter product, as diet drinks, especially like Diet Coke and everything, were getting bigger, and people were getting a little more familiar with that sort of sweetness. They were trying to create like a actual sugared version of that, among other things. And there's different theories on why they did that. So they do a lot of testing, a lot of market research. And many people are saying they like the new flavor, but they liked it more as an addition to the Coke lineup. So Coke would end up abandoning the old formula altogether, and they released New Coke on April 23rd, 1985, and people went ballistic. And again, it's not that they disliked New Coke, but the problem was Coke had stopped making the original formula altogether, and they did not anticipate the nostalgia people had for it. And again, people went nuts. They were like getting massive letter writing campaigns. They were getting like 1,500 letters a day. They had a 24/7 phone complaint line going on. They had to even hire psychiatrists to analyze the messages they were getting from people. And they like psychiatrists, psychologists, everyone, what they were concluding was people were responding to the loss of the original Coke the same way they would to losing a family member. Like, that's how much of an impact it had on them that they didn't realize. So Coke eventually throws in the towel, and they stop producing New Coke just 79 days after launching it. They then bring back the original Coke formula, and they rebrand it as Coca-Cola Classic, and it kept that title up till 2009. So again, go back and listen to my episode. It goes way more in depth. But it's been considered one of the biggest marketing screw-ups in history. And at the same time, some people question if that was their intention the whole time, was to create this nostalgia around the original Coke. But either way, the inclusion of New Coke in season 3 is brilliant. And Coca-Cola launched a campaign in conjunction with the show to bring back the original New Coke formula for a limited time. You probably saw this all over the news when they released it. And when Coke, go on coca-cola.com/1985, and that was their link to selling it. And the design of the website is like an old style internet page. And the site like immediately crashed when it was released. I was on there like trying to get it. It was impossible. So it's such an amazing idea for a campaign to use a piece of history in a modern show that's set in the past and then bring that original product back into the real world. So it's amazing how they work together with the show to like write it in, and the fact that they could bring this back and something like get a second life out of something that's considered one of the biggest flops in marketing history. So yeah, I'm so psyched about that. I don't know how deep it'll go beyond just like, oh, she's drinking a new Coke, but whatever. But again, check out the coca-cola.com/1985. So you can get, I think in the package, it includes 2 cans of New Coke and then 2 specific Stranger Things bottles I think one's a Coke Zero and one's a regular Coke, and they're specifically like branded for Stranger Things. So either way, amazing. Okay, let's look at some of the theories for Stranger Things season 3. So here's the thing with me, like I used to be big on, I don't know, seeing what everyone's saying and speculating, and that's what the internet does. It speculates till the cows come home on what to expect anytime a trailer drops. And you know, I wanted to find every theory, but it's gotten to the point now I don't want to ruin shows or movies. I want to go in as fresh as possible now, and then I like to see more of the response afterwards, more of the dissection and the interpretation of whatever, whether it's a Marvel movie or Stranger Things or whatever. So the other thing now is the producers are so deliberate with what they reveal in trailers now, because they know, like if you look at a trailer from 10 years ago, they're so like clunky and almost juvenile. They're just sort of put together like, hey, here's this and this might happen, this. And now people like are so involved and ingrained in like these different worlds and universes. So they don't want to reveal too much, and they know that everyone's going to go through these trailers with a fine-tooth comb and break down every single scene. So everything I think you see in trailers now is so deliberately put in there, including showing scenes that won't even appear in the final product, like anything they can do to throw people off. And again, like Marvel probably does that better than anybody. So again, you can stop listening now if you don't want to hear things that might come true or might not come true, or, you know, may kind of throw you off because they might be in the back of your head and you might be anticipating or expecting and not being surprised. So I'm going over a few, and yeah, so I mean, you can stop now or continue on, or you might have read a lot of them already. So regarding the whole thing with the trailer, and I think, I'm not sure if this is the case because it's so clearly shown in the trailer that one of the big theories for season 3 is that Billy is infected with something from the Upside Down and is basically in the process of being turned into some sort of creature. And it's thought that the monster from the end of that first trailer is actually Billy after that full metamorphosis. And so that seems what's obvious, but the more I looked at it, and again, we'll see how wrong I am, I think it's so obvious that they're showing that this is a conclusion in the trailer that I don't think it's going to end up being the case. You know what I mean? Like it's almost like they're like, Billy's going to get bit, he's going to turn into the creature. Like it's so clear, unless they want that to be a big focal point and to draw people in, but I don't think they would give away that much. And again, the big appeal with all these shows and, you know, is just not knowing where it's going to lead. So that's sort of my idea. And then here's a few other theories that have been predicted, kind of combination of what I've read, combination of my own, just a few I'll put together. So, you know, again, one of that ideas like Billy's definitely got to be infected and turn into a monster and die or whatever, because everyone who's so far in each season who has a name starting with B has kicked the bucket. Barb in season 1, Bob in season 2, Billy in season 3. So whatever, we'll see. The next sort of theory is that the Mind Flayer is going to start hijacking more of the minds of the people in the town and start turning the people in the town into various monsters. And that might be what you're seeing in the trailer. Another thing, though, is that they've been really focused on showing rats in the trailer, especially running into this steel mill. And that idea is that they're going to be turned into an army of monsters by the Mind Flayer. He's got access to all these rats. They'll do that. Like I said before, the Starcourt Mall clearly is the epicenter of everything. And I mean, they're not hiding that, because the final battle, the final episode is called the Battle of Starcourt. And again, they show that in the trailer, very Dawn of the Dead again. And so it's thought that the mall has actually been built over that old energy lab from season 1 and 2, you know, where 11 comes from and everything like that. I'd say that's a pretty good bet. Just again, how deep it goes and how much it's connected. And then another theory is that the Mind Flayer is creating another sort of alternate universe and bringing people over from the real world to populate it, but sort of like contorting them into various monsters, like with the shots of 11 standing on the beach, that's possibly a different dimension or alternate universe. So, but I mean, these are kind of things we would sort of expect anyway. We don't know how specifically right they might be. So again, grain of salt, see what you think. Okay, so I'll start wrapping up here. Hopefully you're as excited as I am. Hopefully this preview show gets you ready to go with it. Again, like I love that they're moving the setting into summertime. It's away from more that typical fall spooky Halloween thing. It's more summer fun and summer carnivals and fairs. I think that's an awesome new direction. Again, the characters are growing up, and I think that the season can push the maturity of not just them, but of the whole series. And I think this is their pinnacle. Say they're going to do 5 seasons. This is their pinnacle season, I would say, because it's just going to change the trajectory of everything and kind of launch where these characters are going and what they're going to become. I also love, again, that it's set in 1985, which I think is the pinnacle year of the whole decade. Again, now there's a few more things that can be referenced that are going to be released to the kids in the Stranger Things world, like Back to the Future has come out, The Goonies is out, Weird Science is out, The Breakfast Club. So a lot of those cool things they can now include. But again, this might seem weird as much as I love all the references and throwbacks, but I'm hoping they don't go overboard on all that just for nostalgia's sake. I felt they did that a little too much in season 2. They're like including, it's a little kind of like the Memba berries from South Park. Like you're putting those things just, I know it's like a fan service and that's awesome. And I think the first season established that perfectly with how it was including these classic things we loved, and they're still important, and they're still important in season 2. But a few of the things I thought they were just kind of being a little too upfront with, and they weren't necessarily needed. Again, I'm not going to complain, if it doesn't distract. Now I think they're branching off, and it's their own legacy they're created. But obviously, I still want some sort of like flux capacitor DeLorean reference, 100%. Again, the whole as a show, like there's a ton of money been spent. I haven't even Netflix is so protective with a lot of this stuff, and I haven't been able to find anywhere how much they've spent on this thing. But apparently, it's a crap load. And again, the production values look so ramped up for this season. And it looks like the most work has been put in this season than the other ones. And apparently the Duffer Brothers had begun writing it back in 2016 before the second season had even premiered. So I would say that the characters will be more fully developed, more fleshed out. And I think, again, like the growth of the show will be massive in this 3rd season. And again, like any form of entertainment, all the production in the world doesn't mean a damn thing if the writing sucks. Like just look at the last season of Game of Thrones and how upset everyone was about that. And we have people like super creative people like these Duffer Brothers and all the people involved, they have so much pride in this, and they know, they don't want to phone it in, and they wouldn't even risk putting themselves in that position. So again, the writing is so critical. Everything to do with TV, everything you love, like it doesn't matter how it looks, how it's filmed, everything comes down to writing. And I think they're going to put and have put the most writing and development into this season. And again, like the cast has described the season 3 as bigger, darker, and scarier. And I think that's exactly what I'm hoping for, and hopefully you're hoping for too. So let's cut it off there. Hopefully you enjoyed this one. If you know other people who might like this, share it with them. But again, if you haven't already, subscribe to the show, and I'll do like a season 3 recap after it's out. I wanted to get this out just in time before July 4th. So that's it. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.